Chapter 3. Two prophecies are fulfilled. Perhaps because he was troubled by the events that had caused Balin to leave the court, Arthur became ill. While he was resting in a meadow outside the castle, he saw a knight riding by. The anguished knight did not recognize the king. Arthur asked the knight why he was so upset. The king just shook his head and continued on his way. Then Balin rode by the meadow. Arthur asked Balin to go after the knight and find out what had happened to him. Before long, Balin found the knight in the forest. He was with a young noblewoman. Balin convinced the knight to come back to the court. They left the lady in the forest and returned to Arthur's castle. To Balin's and Arthur's horror, as the knight approached the king, he was pierced by a sword, but there was no arm or body attached to the sword. The knight fell from the horse. As he lay dying, he gasped, "My name is Hur Louis Le Barbus. The invisible knight who slew me is King Garleon. You must go to my lady in the forest and tell her what happened. Then you must avenge my death." Balin did as the knight requested. Together Balin and the lady set off to look for Garlon. They met another knight who offered to go with them. The group traveled for a while in peace, but when they reached a hermitage, they saw the sword carried by the invisible knight Garlon. Balin and the lady cried out when the sword pierced their companion, leaving the body to be buried by a holy man who lived in the hermitage. Balin and the lady left to follow the evil Garlon. A grand castle came into view, and Balin directed their horses toward it. When they passed through the gate, a number of knights grabbed the lady. Balin raced forward to defend her. One of the knights held up his hand. "We mean no harm," the knight said. "Our mistress is under an evil enchantment. She is very ill, and can only be cured by the blood of a noble woman, of royal blood. We do not know who the lady is. Whenever a young maiden passes by, we seize for her, for she may be the one to cure our mistress." Balin looked at his companion. She agreed to give some of her blood to the knights, but it did not cure their mistress. The knights thanked them and requested that they stay at the castle until morning. For the next few days, Balin and the lady searched for Garlon. They continued on in peace. On the third day, they arrived at a fine manor house. Seeing that the maiden needed rest, Balin led their horses to the manor. The lord of the manor welcomed them and offered them dinner and shelter for the night. Here is Balin and the lady going to the inn. The lord told Balin about his son, who had been seriously wounded during the course of the meal. The son frequently groaned and cried out in pain. Balin asked what caused the son's injuries. He received a grievous wound by a sword, but no hand held that sword, and no knight appeared to claim the deed. I have consulted many wise men. They told me that the only cure for my son's wounds is the invisible knight's own blood. Perhaps I can help you. The knight who committed that crime is Sir Garlon. He has dishonored a noble calling of knighthood. We have been searching for this knight to avenge the wrongs that he has done. If you suggest a direction for our search, we will gladly continue until we find Sir Garlon. King Pellam has proclaimed a feast and invited all the nobles and knights in this area. It is certain that this knight will attend. If you stay here until the feast day, I will ride with you to King Pellam's castle." Then the lord said. On the appointed day, Balin went with the lady and the lord to Pellam's castle. They were cordially received and taken to the banquet hall. Balin was careful to keep his sword concealed as the festivities began. The lord and the ladies talked freely. Balin turned and asked the nobleman sitting next to him to point out Sir Garlon. Garlon was seated across from Balin. Now that the invisible knight could be seen, Balin judged him to be haughty and indiscreet. Garlon must have seen Balin scowling, for he came over and slapped Balin's face. Balin was outraged and could not control his anger. He drew his sword and cut down Garlon in one stroke. He took some of the invisible knight's blood to cure the Lord's son. Then he prepared to leave King Pellam's castle. The king's knights stopped them. Pellam went up to Balin and said, "You will pay for murdering my brother and abusing my hospitality." The king took his sword and gave Balin a terrible blow. Balin raised his sword to fend off the blow, and the sword shattered. Without a weapon, Balin knew he would surely be defeated, so he ran through the castle, hoping to find a sword or a spear. In a dimly lit, sumptuous room, he found a magnificent, intricately wrought spear. It lay on a table of pure gold, which was held up by 4 silver pillars. He picked up the spear just as King Pellam entered the room. Balin struck him, and the king fell. The spear that Balin used to strike the king was no other than the spear that had pierced Christ's body as he was hung on the cross. Joseph of Arimathea had brought it to Britain, along with the Holy Grail. King Pellam was Joseph's descendant. As Merlin had foretold, Balin had with one stroke changed the course of history. Pellam's castle came crashing down. Everyone in Pellam's court died. 3 surrounding kingdoms became wastelands, and the wound that Britain had given Pellam would remain open for many years. Only King Pellam and Balin remained alive, but both were senseless. Merlin came to the castle and explained everything that had happened. Balin said farewell to Merlin and went on the last leg of his prophecy. Merlin's prophecy had been fulfilled, but the maiden from whom Balin took the sword had made another prophecy. Her prediction now troubled Balin at the time, and now he had forgotten it. Eventually, Balin came to a cross inscribed with these words: "All knights be wary, none may ride alone to this castle." Balin disregarded the warning and rode on until he saw an old man. The man raised an arm to stop him. "Heed the warning and turn back," the old man cried, hearing a horn ring out in the distance. Balin ignored the man and urged his horse forward. At the castle, Balin found many knights and fine ladies who encouraged him to join their amusements. After a while, the mistress of the castle came to Balin and invited him to joust with a knight who kept watch over an island. "You may not pass through here unless you defeat him," she said. Balin did not want to fight any more, but he did not want to remain at the castle. While he prepared for battle, another knight offered him a shield. The shield was larger than Balin's. He accepted it gratefully. There was no markings on the shield to identify him, but Balin thought it was unlikely that anyone at the castle would know him. When he was ready to joust, Balin was escorted to the field. The knight of the island wore red armor. His horse had a red harness. Balin was curious about the knight's identity, but the red knight had no markings on his shield either. The knights matched each other, blow after blow. After hours of fighting, neither one had gained an advantage. They were seriously wounded, gasping for breath. Balin asked the red knight his name. "Sir Balin, the knight of King Arthur's court," the red knight said. Balin cried out in despair. "I have killed my own brother," he raved. "And I have killed my own brother," Balin echoed him. "Do not despair, dear brother. I have fought with the king on the island. When I defeated him, I had to take his place. You might have reached this castle first and defeated the knight of the island, but the end of our stories would have been the same." Knights from the castle buried the brothers in the same grave. Merlin came and took Balin's sword. He made a new handle for it and put it into the scabbard. Holding it out before him, he asked the knight to draw it from the scabbard. The knight could not do so. Merlin proclaimed that the sword was enchanted and only could be removed by a special knight. Merlin built an enchanted bridge from the island to the mainland. Only knights of purity would be able to cross it. Using his magic, Merlin put the sword into a marble block that sat in the water surrounding the island. The blade was visible above the water's surface and shone brilliantly. The scabbard was left on land. Merlin predicted that one day the most pure and noble knight will discover both and use them on his quest for the Holy Grail.